In today's video, we're back with some updated NHL trade rumors concerning the Winnipeg Jets and Jacob Trouba, as well as others, and we also have some big updates on pending free agents Erik Karlsson and Kevin Hayes. We'll get into all the latest coming up next. So as I mentioned, we have all kinds of updates in the rumor mill here concerning some pending free agents as well as some potential trades we might see coming up here. We've already had a busy flurry of trades over the past couple of days, and I fully expect that type of activity likely could continue throughout the week. So far, most of the deals have been fairly minor, but I likely could be building up to something more significant here as the draft is next Friday. There's certainly going to be some teams looking to maybe trade up or down in the draft, so lots of players could be involved as well. So certainly want to stay tuned. There should be all kinds of action this week. Now, one of the biggest updates we had here comes in the form of Erik Karlsson and potentially staying in the San Jose Sharks. Now, of course, a lot of today's information comes from the Elliot Friedman 31 Thoughts blog as well as some other places, but the bulk of it comes from Friedman's blog here. Now, the latest on Carlson indicates that the Sharks are making a major significant push here in order to try to retain the defenseman that they gave up quite a bit in order to trade for earlier at the beginning of last season. The rumor now is that they're offering him an 8-year contract, and of course they're the only team that can do that, being that he's already part of that organization, and it very well could exceed Drew Doughty money is the latest speculation now, which is kind of crazy thinking about everything that Carlson's been through over the past couple of years and all the injuries and just had another surgery. I know I've seen many people feel out there that his value kind of diminished a little bit because of all that, but at the same time, when he has played, he has been, certainly on par and certainly one of the best defensemen in the NHL for sure. Many also speculated that he was likely heading back east, that teams like Ottawa and Montreal were looking to maybe get involved, and he was hoping to have some pretty significant and competitive offers from Eastern teams to kind of satisfy his personal life, where his wife's from Ottawa. Heading east was certainly a preference for that part at least, but now it might be too tough for him to turn down. It's hard to say what exactly the situation is going to be, but it is being speculated that it could be north of $11 million to be the highest paid defenseman in the NHL, which would be a significant increase over what they're paying Brent Burns and others on that team. So certainly could be something pretty substantial there. Carlson was hanging around San Jose after his surgery. He's been spotted meeting with Doug Wilson numerous times, been out a lot within the community. So we'll see what happens. And they're certainly making their best foot forward to try to retain him. And we'll see if they can get a deal done. But they do have an edge with the fact that they're the only team that can offer him 8 years. But I guess we'll see how important the family aspect of things really is to him and his wife. Because obviously if it is that important, then he'll probably find a way to head east anyways. But it might be difficult to turn down a pitch to make more than $11 million per year over an 8-year contract. So we'll stay tuned for further updates as we approach free agency on Erik Karlsson. With Kevin Hayes and the Philadelphia Flyers, of course, they acquired him from the Winnipeg Jets for a 5th-round draft pick, and they've been meeting, having some discussions around a potential contract. And as I had indicated before, it looks as though that he may not be having Philadelphia as the number one preference on his list. Now, according to Elliot Friedman in his blog, part of what might be holding things up, it might be the actual dollar amount that Hayes is looking for. Some people believe he's looking anywhere between $6.5 and $7.5 million, which would be a fairly significant raise over what he was earning before, and that the Flyers might have some objections to paying him that amount, which is why we don't have a contract yet. But it's also believed, as I mentioned before, that some of the other teams within that area of the eastern U.S. are teams that would have interest here as well. There was some people speculating that there was interest from the Boston Bruins, and mutual interest from Kevin Hayes as well, which I understand he's from that area. Likely, probably would be quite open to playing in Boston, but considering they have Bergeron, Krejci, and now Charlie Coyle down the middle, it's hard to imagine with all their terms left on their contracts that they would try to squeeze in Kevin Hayes as well. I guess you never know, but I don't really think the odds are very high. But however, progress continues to be made here between the Flyers and Hayes, but it looks as though his asking price might be somewhere near that $7 million mark, which might be causing them to be a little bit more cautious here than they originally thought. It's also believed that the Buffalo Sabres and the New York Rangers have been having some trade discussions, possibly involving forward Jimmy Vesey. Of course, Jimmy Vesey was a college free agent signing by the New York Rangers. He hasn't necessarily lived up to the full expectation, but he has been improving a little bit every year. Under head coach David Quinn last year, Vesey did seem to make some progress, but now he's involved in trade talks. And as the Rangers kind of progress in this rebuild, and there is some talk here that they could be a lot more aggressive through trades and free agency to really move this rebuild along, it certainly seems like guys like Jimmy Vesey or even Vladislav Nemestikov could very well be trade targets. Even Pavel Buchnevich, it wouldn't rule out the possibility they consider moving him. Of course, there's been some talk they might buy out Shattenkirk or Smith, or possibly both on the blue line. I don't think they would do both, and I do think Smith is more likely given the terms of the contract. But either way, the Rangers are certainly quite active, and it looks as though the Sabres are showing a lot of interest in Jimmy Vesey. So we'll see if there's any more on that front. Now, in regards to Loui Eriksson and the Vancouver Canucks, obviously it's been a lot of talk around this player since the end of the season here. We've heard many talks about Eriksson for Lucic or James Neal in Calgary and all of that stuff. But his agent, JP Barry, has come out and said that he feels that it's time for Eriksson to move on from Vancouver. So obviously he likely indicates here that he wants a trade for his client. So we'll see if the Canucks actually do proceed here with one of these deals, whether or not it's with the Oilers or somebody else. It likely is going to have to involve a bad contract swap. More than likely, I can't imagine too many other teams swapping Eriksson for anybody else outside of a bad contract. So we'll see if anything further progresses here between the Canucks and Oilers, or the Canucks and Flames, or any of those deals that have been discussed here recently. But it looks as though, to make anything happen with Edmonton, the Oilers are going to have to pony up more than just Lucic, where his contract is an extra year longer. But according to his agent, it looks as though they might be looking for a fresh start. According to Elliot Friedman's blog as well, there should be a decision sometime before the draft on Roberto Luongo as well. GM Dale Talon indicated that should be taking place sometime this week. Obviously, there probably is some concern whether or not he can play and maybe possibly goes on LTIR. I guess he could consider retirement, but I guess that likely doesn't make sense where he still has money left on a contract. Most players won't retire because they want to get paid their contract. There also would be a salary cap penalty to the Canucks as well because of that contract if he did retire, which I know they're probably not real keen on, which obviously isn't his problem now. But there is some talk around Luongo and what his status will be next year, and we should find out further information about that here in the coming days. There's been some talk they might trade goalie James Reimer. There's been some talk that they're aggressively going to go after Sergei Bobrovsky. I would think more than likely that if Luongo can play, that they would go with a duo of Luongo and Bobrovsky. But I guess you never know. I mean, he's had a lot of injury problems over the years. If there's any possibility he's going to end up coming to training camp and failing a physical, maybe end up in LTIR, that certainly is another situation they have to be cautious of here. So I guess we'll wait for further word here on what this could possibly mean for the future of Luongo in Florida. Now, in regards to Jacob Trouba and the Winnipeg Jets, there's no secret here that he's a player that's being shopped. The Jets are certainly talking to a number of teams. One of the teams that we hadn't heard of until recently that was showing interest was the Pittsburgh Penguins, although many believe that finding the right fit there for what the Jets are going to want in return is going to prove to be tricky, and that a deal might be less likely to take place. Obviously, the Jets' rumored asking price is pretty significant. They're likely looking for a first-round pick, along with potentially up to 2 pretty solid prospects, and I think it would depend on the quality of the prospects going back in the deal. They could possibly accept 1 or 1 and a pick, depending on exactly what those pieces end up being. But the price is pretty significant. It's believed Trouba is going to be looking for somewhere in the neighborhood of a 7-year deal, around $7 million, maybe even a tad more to sign him. Obviously, any team that's going to pay up to trade for a pending RFA is going to want to have a contract ironed out. As of right now, we haven't been led to believe that the Jets have allowed Trouba's camp to talk to any other teams about a potential contract, so that's not happening as far as we can tell here. So it certainly could be tricky here for the Jets to make this deal happen, even though all parties involved likely would like to see it go down. They very well could end up deciding that they can't get the price they want, keep him this year as basically their own rental, or depending on how the season goes, consider doing a trade deadline deal with him. But I do believe if he doesn't get signed to anything more than a 1-year deal, which is likely going to happen if he stays in Winnipeg, that he would end up becoming a UFA next year and likely walking for nothing unless he was traded beforehand. So I guess we'll have to stay tuned here on Jacob Trouba. The asking price is pretty significant. I know that the one other possibility, though, is if they can get a comparable young defenseman in return on a much more controlled contract, they likely would consider that as well. And there has been some talk out there about the possibility of the Flyers being interested, and could we possibly see a swap of Trouba for Shane Gostisbehere. Certainly an intriguing thought, at least. I'm not sure that they've had discussions, but the Flyers have been a team that's kind of been mentioned in those trade rumors around Jacob Trouba. Obviously, they've been having a lot of trade rumors around that team because they're kind of in transition here. We saw them make a few deals here in the past couple days, and a lot of it around their blue line, trading Gudas for Niskanen. They bought out Andrew McDonald, so there's some changes there. They basically also indicated that more than likely Philippe Myers takes that third pair right spot on the blue line next year as well. Obviously, he had an impressive start to his NHL career this year, and obviously things went well, and it looks as though, based on what Chuck Fletcher said, that they kind of expect him to be that right shot D on the third pair. So I guess there's still a possibility they could end up trading Gostisbehere, and they could possibly swap him for Trouba. I mean, I think there would be some interest from the Jets side, especially if you take a look at Winnipeg and what they're at. I mean, obviously, Gostisbehere is still a pretty young, solid defenseman who has some more cost certainty for a number of years in his contract. The Flyers get all kinds of cap space, so they could certainly afford to pay Trouba somewhere near what he's asking. So wouldn't be a complete shocker to see that deal go down. I'm not sure if that's mutual interest, but there is a lot of belief out there that they would be a type of deal that would make sense. I know there's been some link to Trouba as well to both of the teams down in Florida because apparently his fiance is attending med school down there, but I don't really know how either of those teams could make it work based on what they each individually have going on. So I think that's highly unlikely he ends up there. So we'll see what happens here, but certainly lots of talk around Trouba. But the main talk today is obviously the Penguins being interested but having a hard time finding a deal. I'm not sure they'd really have the younger pieces or prospects that the Jets would be looking for. But the Flyers, on the other hand, would, whether or not it's Shane Gostisbehere or somebody else. They have a lot of prospects. They have a good draft selection here, and they have obviously Gostisbehere himself, which could very well be exactly something that the Jets are looking for here. Of course, we saw the first round of NHL buyouts get started here yesterday as well, so certainly keep your eye on some other names, including Scott Darling from the Carolina Hurricanes. There's always a possibility Corey Perry from the Anaheim Ducks as well, and even Valerie Nichushkin from Dallas. You get Karl Alzner in Montreal, and as I mentioned, guys like Shattenkirk and Smith and the Rangers organization. So I do expect more and more of these players to likely go down this buyout process here once we find out more details of what those teams are doing. Obviously, they're likely trying to work out trades first, and if that can't happen, then we'll see the buyout process begin, and they have up until June the 30th to make that happen. So that is all your latest updates here and all the latest free agent and trade rumors for today. So certainly stay tuned. I'll keep you up to date as all this information becomes available. Like I said, the draft is next Friday. Free agency's not that far away, so it's going to be a very, very busy time. So stay tuned to the channel for all the latest news updates. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you next time.